Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Shreve Memorial Library Virtual Author Chat. The Virtual Author Chat happens right here each Thursday, well, the first Thursday of each month at 6 p.m. And we are so excited this evening to have Dr. Tyrone Burton back with us with his second book, More Than a Notion, A Journey in Educational Leadership in the Age of Accountability. Dr. Burton, we're so happy that you are here with us tonight. For all of you guys who may not know Dr. Burton was a elementary school principal right here in Shreveport at Cherokee Park Elementary School, and we're so happy to have him back tonight. Dr. Burton?
Thank you, glad to be here, and thank you all for having me.
Yes. Well, we're going to jump right into More Than a Notion, A Journey in Educational Leadership and Accountability. First off, I believe, and it is the first chapter in your book, you talk about the error and the error of accountability. Let's talk about that for a little while.
That's a good place to start. In 2000, when George II became president, he changed the way that education is done. He instituted No Child Left Behind, and that became law in America for educators, which meant that we went from having the model that we had to a business model. And so you start hearing phrases like human capital. We were testing before, but accountability came with all of a sudden alphabet schools were being graded. There were standardized tests, and the tests were often, the measuring stick was often misaligned, or it was designed such that that gap between the have and have-nots was even more exacerbated. And initially, it was an unfunded mandate. However, when President Barack Obama came into office, he fully funded the mandate of the law. So it put some teeth into it, but he could not change the law. So we still have this era, the era that we're in. And the era part is the fact that accountability is really a system built within the education system that really keeps the gap between the have and have-nots. And that really reflects America. America is a country of have and have-nots, good, bad, and different. So our system really reflects that.
Wow. Can you tell us, I guess, some of the drawbacks of the system as it relates to education? Of course, I know you're saying it's a have and have-nots. Tell us a little bit about what it's like with the have-nots.
Well, typically the have-nots are students and families who are under-resourced academically and socially, people who are mid to low income, and generally your working class America. And the test, the language in the test is sometimes skewed. In fact, most times it is. And they use a one-size-fits-all measurement stick. Even though they've made changes in the test is still designed to keep that gap there. You know, in America, we have the 1%ers. Those are people that most of us don't know. They're the uber rich. And then you have those who are really wealthy, and those are the folk on Wall Street, folk who make 6, 7 figures, 7, 8 figures, nothing wrong with that at all. But then you have the working class, those people who work hard every day, and there's nothing wrong with good, honest wage, but they're really good, just honest wage workers. And that educational gap, that gap is designed to keep that barrier, if you will, between those two classes or those three classes. First of all, the uber rich, they go to private school. And some of the really wealthy kids go to private school. So we're really talking about upper middle class and middle class versus lower class and those who are in poverty. And not that that transition cannot happen, but the gap is such that you keep a working class, and the working class never gets to the point, or very seldom gets to the point, that they exceed their economic base or the household that they're raised in terms of economy, unless education and progressive mindset is made a priority in that house. In that case, then they want the children to do better than they did. I grew up in an era where my mom wanted me and my brother to do better than what she did. but that has to permeate in the household first. And very often when we see generational poverty, that mindset is just defeated.
Right, right. That is so interesting. Of course, we're going to go to chapter 2, where you talk about finding and refinding effective leadership.
Yeah, let me loop back and tie that into the introduction, because that kind of lays the foundation. In that, I talk about how doctors go to school for 8 years. And after that, they get a chance to practice medicine. Lawyers go to school for 8 years with the opportunity to practice law. No guarantees, practice medicine, practice law. Those of us who are school leaders or aspiring leaders, most of us were teachers, 5 years. If you get your master's, maybe 6, 7 years, and we don't get a chance to practice, we have to get it right the first time. We have to, as it was said in the South, we have to get it done. So there was no practice there. So that lays the foundation for what is a very stressful time for those who lead to have, because unlike the other two professions where they get to practice, we can't practice. Now, on top of that, making again the parallel to doctors, there are general practitioners and there are specialists. General practitioners, if you just have a regular old ailment, you can go there and they can pretty much patch you up. However, if you go to the doctor and you're really, really sick, and your general practitioner does not know what to do, then he or she will recommend a specialist. Now, herein lies the finding and refining leadership. Those who lead schools, but students are academically resourced through socially or academic means, that's a different kind of leading than it is at a school where you have middle-class parents where the kid goes home and he's read to every night, homework is checked. Sometimes they have a tutor to enhance what they're doing. That's a different kind of leading. That's a different kind of parent, not bad, just different. So it means a refined skill set to know how to build capacity, not just in the teachers that they have, but also build capacity in the community, to build the community base such that they have a caring attitude for the school. It means building what we call academic efficacy, which means building bridges of trust that often sometimes is not there. But that principal at that school has to have that skill set. And most often we get teachers who are not really well equipped. So that means putting in place a professional development model where we actually train teachers, not just how to teach, but how to teach a student population that is just like that. So it's a different kind of teaching, different kind of leading, and a different kind of training. So the key is to find your niche where you are in the leading process. There are leaders and there are those who lead. Leaders have positions and power, but those who lead inspire others to be better than what they ever thought to be. People at those schools have to lead and inspire others to be better than what they thought to be.
Tell us a little bit about your experience as a principal at Cherokee Park, and I think that might give our audience a little better idea of what it is that you just said.
That's a really good question. I need to say that the person who I retired as a principal was not the person who I started as a principal. I had been an assistant principal for a number of years. So I knew how to manage a school from an administrative standpoint or supervision. I knew about buses, I knew about discipline, I knew about all the rudiments of the administrative side. But as I grew from someone having a position to someone having a passion to lead. Completely different skill set. Someone who has a passion to lead builds capacity with the folk around them such that they adopt the person's vision and mission for the school, and really it changes the entire community. My school was very blessed in that I had someone who was my director who sold into me, poured into me, who caused me or forced me to be better than what I was. And so, I adopted what was then called the transformational leadership style. I grew that style into what is now called passion-driven leadership. And there I have what's called the leadership continuum, with the low end being position, which means you just have a job, you have a title, you have a position, and you're given a thought to do certain things. But passion means that When you go to bed, you wake up, it's on your mind. When you talk about it, it's on your mind. Passion means that you live it, you breathe it. Passion means that that energy you have, because energy is contagious, both positive and negative. When you're passion driven, that positive energy radiates and changes everyone around you.
Mhm. Wow. Now let's talk about finding and refining that effective leadership.
Yeah,
Does that-
I went through several psychometric, I guess, tests. Some through the system that I worked with, and some when I was working on my doctorate. One is what's called True Colors, where you have you take an inventory test and you find out about your personality. Kind of like the zodiac, but it's much more refined. And the other was where you have the shapes and that tells you what your tendencies may be. All of those things helped me to find who I truly was as a person first. Once I found out who I was as a person, I found out my strengths and my weaknesses, and I acknowledged my strengths and my weaknesses. Once I found Tyrone, I was able to find my person as a leader, who I wanted to be as a leader. And there are different kinds of leadership styles. When I went there first, I was an autocrat. I just told everybody what to do. I didn't know me. I didn't know my style. I just had the style that I came with. And then there's transactional, where you do something for me, I do something for you. Well, that's okay for a short term, but if you really want to change a system, you have to transform the system. And the first person you have to transform is yourself. So when I found myself and transformed myself, it was easy for me to transform the folk around me.
When did the light come on?
I'll be honest, Ivy, it was a process. The light was plugged in the socket around year 6 or 7. The light bulb was at about 40 watts at about 8. And at about year 9, it was a 60-watt bulb, and after that, it was burning 100.
I'm laughing. I'm laughing at the 60 watt. That is so amazing. And matter of fact, we can hear the passion for education in your voice. I would always stand sort of back and be in awe of your teaching whenever I had the opportunity to watch you teach. Let's go to chapter 4. It talks about beyond a turnaround.
Wow, that is, wow, you hit some good ones. In our business, as I mentioned, we have this area called accountability. And schools now have grades, good, bad, and different. They have grades. And though the measuring stick for those grades change sometime year after year. In fact, what one state calls proficient, another state calls basic, in terms of what a student is considered to be an average student. Be that as it may, once a school in most states misses its grade or school performance score, and they become a D for 3 or more years, then that school is considered to be in trouble, academic trouble by the state.
Mm-hmm.
And those schools have to be what we call turned around. Now, what happens once a school is deemed that, most districts throw tons of money in it, they throw tons of resources at it, they throw people in it to do it. And once the school, and so it takes about 1 or 2 years, but once the school is turned around, all those resources, all the money, all the human capital, most of the time is taken away. So what happens is that most of those schools make their turn. When the resources are pulled away, they go back. That chapter talks specifically about how to move a school past beyond the turnaround process.
Mm-hmm.
Once you've made, and the turnaround is not a place where you hang out. Turnaround is a place where you have for 2, at the most 3 years, and once you've made that turn, then you, along the way, you put those things or processes in place, such that when you've made that turn, then you can keep that trajectory. So the school and the community is on an upward spiral towards maintaining and sustaining that sense of academic efficacy and a sense of community, whereby students trust teachers, teachers trust students, parents trust teachers, teachers trust the principal. So those foundation, those building blocks are put there. But that, again, that goes back to their leadership style. You can't turn around the school when you can. If you are an autocratic leader and you just tell folks what to do, you can turn around the school, but when you leave, we'll turn back. If you're a transactional leader and you do quid pro quo, you do something for me, I do something for you. When that money's gone, it stops. But when you truly transform a school and a community, then even when the money is gone, the transformation still takes place because the folk around you have adopted the vision and mission that whoever you have for success, because the principal is the brand of the school. You're the brand. When I was a principal, they would, they knew my name, but they would always call me Cherokee Park. I was Cherokee Park everywhere I went because I knew I was the brand. And I was one of those old school principals. When school started, I was the first face they saw. I was in front of my school every day. When they left, I was the last face they saw. I was in front of my school every day because I knew I was a brand. And if I was dressed correctly, dressed like I was the principal, and I was out in front of my school every day, then the perception was there. Everything must be okay inside for me to be outside. There are 4 types of data: academic, perception, background, and demographic. Most of our publics operate on perception data, what they perceive to be right or wrong. So if I was outside, the perception okay inside. So they have to change the mindset of my community because they perceive that things were okay. And when they came in, it was, but that whole chapter talks about how to make that turn and how to sustain that. But it's really about building capacity on your team. And the leadership team should be composed of all the administrators and the counselor and a couple of key lead teachers. There is a difference in an administrative team and an instructional leadership team, different kinds of meetings. Both are very, very necessary in order for the turnaround process to take place. There has to be a strong connection if a school is going to go beyond turnaround between the school and the community. I was often on community boards, active in the community, because the connection has to take place if the school is going to stay turned around. And that's the difference between some of the schools and my counterpart schools who are here in Louisiana. We call them sometimes magnet schools, because the community, the parents, are vested in the school. They pour resources in. Our parents love their students, but they have to be taught sometimes how to parent, how to support the school in a way such that it sustains the school's academic standing.
Right. Now, I do understand that when you got to Cherokee Park, when you were a principal, it was deemed probably a D school.
Wow, you went way back.
Yeah. And you were able to turn that school around, and we saw you year after year. You would walk the community. Tell our audience about that, because I'm pretty sure there are some educators here with us tonight, and they have that passion, and they just want to know how to get to past that turnaround point.
Well, let me tell you. I wasn't going to tell the story, but let me tell the story. I know we only have an hour, but I'm going to give you the revised standard version. I mentioned we have letter grades now, but when I took over Cherokee Park in 2000, No Child Left Behind had just been instituted. So they didn't have letter grades, they had school performance scores. The cutoff score in Louisiana was a 60. The score at Cherokee Park was 44.4. Now, I had 1 year to turn around, not 2. When schools are forming and turn around, now you get 2 or 3 years. I had 1 year. In fact, there were only 4 schools in Caddo at that time that had that label. All 4 of us turned around, but let me tell you my story. 44.4. First year, we jumped 10 points, 54. Second year, we jumped 10 more points, 54. So we came out first, really the second year. And the third year, it was just icing on top of the cake after that. What I did was, I knew my strengths and my weaknesses. I didn't have a really vast array of leadership styles. I was purely an autocratic, but I surrounded myself with people who were strong where I was weak. I knew I had enough sense to realize what I couldn't do. So I hired a counselor and an instructional coordinator who was strong while I was weak. And we worked as a team every day. We talked every day. And sometimes those meetings got pretty heated, but when we came out, it was all smiles and no one knew what happened behind closed doors. But what happened as a result of that is that the school grew. They learned to trust me, they learned to trust them. At the same time, I immersed myself in the community. I became part of those community boards. As you mentioned, I did what's called the walk. And the walk came because once our scores came up, the Department of Education, the Louisiana Department of Education gave us a grant called the Healthy Schools Initiative. So not only did I walk to school, this community was able to get wider sidewalks, street signs, street lights, bumpers, in the street. Kids got bicycles. It was an enormous grant. But part of that was in teaching, we have something called I do, we do, you do. It's called the gradual release model. I do it first, I model it, I show you how it's done, then we do it together, and then you have it on your own. So I led that process. I want to model what healthy living was. So I decided to have a walk, and I would walk from Booker T to Cherokee Park every year around the same time. As a result of that, it pulled the community in the walk, and it became a really, really big deal. The community really got involved in a healthy lifestyle through the school. So that enabled us to make that process in terms of turning the school around, because the community became involved. Every chance I got, I was on channel 3, 6, or 12, talking about, not about me, talking about the school, talking about the community, because you have to change the perception of what the school is or was. Once that perception is changed and your scores go up and you model those things, that's a recipe and a formula for success, along with growing yourself as a leader, which I had to do.
Wow. Where is Cherokee Park today? And did you ever go back to see what you set in place is still there?
Cherokee Park is actually a much better place than it was when I was there. They have a fabulous leader. Her name is Tangela Sylvie. In fact, Miss Sylvie, I hired her as a teacher, fresh out of Grambling State University, your alma mater. And she worked up the ranks. She went from career teacher to master teacher, from career to mentor teacher, from mentor teacher to master teacher, from master teacher to instructional coordinator, from instructional coordinator to now principal. She was strong while I was weak. The school now looks, phenomenally. She's changed community, the school totally. It looks a whole lot. It's more colorful, more vibrant. And not that we had a dull school, but her vision for the school was much more refined in mine. She engages the community much more than I did at a much greater level. She's really good at social media. And while her score may not really reflect that, she's made some vast changes in the school to really get that score to where it's in a position to really make that turn and sustain that turn. So all the things are in place to make it happen.
Wonderful. That is wonderful. Chapter 5 talks about data-driven or data-informed. Tell us.
You're hitting all the hot ones, right? That's, in fact, that chapter and the one about the balancing act are my favorite chapters. Let me tell you why. In education, let me back it up. When I go to my doctor, I have diabetes. He's gonna run tests. He's gonna ask me how I'm doing, but I'm gonna have lab work. He's gonna do all kind of tests, and he's gonna use the results from that test to make an informed decision regarding my medication. Now, he may ask me how I'm doing, but he's gonna make his informed decision based upon all those battery of tests. Now, in education, as I mentioned, there are 4 kinds of data: academic background, perception, and demographic. The background data on me said, as a kid, I came from a single parent home. In fact, I was raised at home with my grandparents. So technically I grew up homeless. Single mom, no dad. And so the data on me, my background data suggested that I wasn't gonna make it. I should have been a statistic. I should be in jail right now or dead right now. But because they saw my potential, not based upon my background, but their perception of what I could be, They didn't let the data drive their decision for my destiny. In education, a really big phrase now is data-driven, data-driven. Well, data-driven absolves or enables us to not be responsible for fully growing the school, the children, and the community. When you make data-informed decisions, it means that you look at all the data, you weigh it in the context of what it was meant for. You don't use academic data to make a background decision. You don't use demographic data to make a perception decision. You look at all those kinds of data, and you look at what the child can be, and you make an informed decision as far as what their potential is, and you grow that child accordingly. Louisiana law says an average teacher can grow a kid 1 year for a year for a year. In other words, that kid at the end of the year should be at least 1 year smarter than he or she was when they started, not the reverse. The reverse says that, well, the data says that he scored a 1 on this test, so all he can do is just go to maybe 1.5 or 2. That's what, because the data says that. Well, when you make a data-informed decision, you look past the numbers and you see what can happen. And you include the children in setting their targets so that they become responsible and partners in their own progress, as well as the parents.
Wow, that is awesome. Chapter 6. Chapter 6 talks about balancing act, the vicissitudes
of life. Yes, ma'am. My mama, bless her heart, was a first grade teacher.
Mm-hmm.
And I would often, whenever she would say that, I wouldn't know what she meant, but she later meant the trials and tribulations of life.
Yes.
And education, especially now, in the context of COVID, I'm gonna go real slow right here because when I get excited, I talk real fast, but I really want to slow down right here. Teachers, principals, everyone who works in the school are now frontline workers in a time where students and educators are dying, literally dying on the job.
Wow. They're
frontline workers. When COVID hit, there was no comprehensive plan from the government. Thank God there is one now. The government told state superintendents, no, the government told state governors, because education is a function of government. They told governors, get it done. Governors told state superintendents, get it done. State superintendents told local superintendents, just get it done. Local superintendents told principals, y'all just get it done. With sometimes little or no comprehensive plan. Now, some districts did a really good job in spite of the not having a comprehensive plan from the government of formulating a really good comprehensive plan. Even at that, there was no one size fits all, and there should not be a one size fits all. And that's the other thing that kind of hurt our profession. We are really big on one size fits all. Well, with COVID, there is no one size fits all because the rate of infection may be high in one place and low in another. So you can't have the same rule, you can have the boundaries. And that's why Dr. Fauci and everyone now is saying, follow the science, follow what the health experts in your area are saying. So while there are some commonalities, there are some things that still have to be addressed at the local level. Back to my other point, because this is a very ominous time. The degree of stress is very, 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 very high. And we are doing a really good job as a profession of addressing the social, emotional needs of the children in COVID. However, we're doing a very poor job of addressing the social and emotional needs of the adults, the teachers, the principals, the superintendents, everyone who's involved in this process right now, whereby you have folk who are literally down on the job every day. And now with the variant, when COVID first hit, very few students got sick. With the variant, we've seen quite a few students, depending upon the state, who are actually getting sick, which is a different thing. It's common now in some states to have sometimes whole classes out, and they have to come back and be test ready at the end of the school year. Accountability doesn't stop because of COVID.
Oh.
States are still testing. Every state still tested last year, in spite of the fact that folk died on the job. good, better, and different. But that's the model we have now with the law we have. It's a business model. I get it. That's just where we are right now. But you know, the thing is, doctors went in the profession knowing that there was going to be some risk. The most of us who went in education didn't go in thinking we'd be on a job that we would may down, but it's happening now. The balancing act means that you spend the time emotionally to put deposits in your emotional bank. Everyone has an emotional bank, and every day folk make deposits or withdrawals in your bank. Because of COVID, and even it happened, it was even true in some schools pre-COVID, but particularly now, most of us go to school every day and our emotional banks are already overdrawn, insufficient funds. Yet they have to move students, they have to increase the student achievement. Principals have to work with teachers and grow them, sometimes with insufficient emotional funds. So the first step in the balancing act is learning how to intentionally make deposits in your emotional bank every day. Find one thing that makes you feel good and do it for you every day. Because if you don't make that emotional deposit, then you'll be going you'll be going to work, you'll have your makeup on, you have your hair done, glad you're looking good. Outside will be dead on the inside.
Wow.
That's what happens when you operate with insufficient emotional funds in your emotional bank. So it means first acknowledging the fact that you have an emotional bank with deposits and withdrawals, and you have to make deposits in your life all the time. So we spend time talking about emotional literacy, and that's what emotional literacy is. It's knowing where what your deposit points are, and without engaging in shame-based thinking, because some educators or in fact, a study came out, WebMD 2020, another study came out shortly thereafter that said that the COVID was having a more adverse effect on women more than men. Some of the side effects were insomnia, depression, and anxiety. And the measurement scale they used measured empathy. I can't think of a profession that has more empathetic people than teachers. They're just passionate people. They're loving people. So when a teacher comes to school or a principal, whoever, and they don't give their 100%, they feel embarrassed or shame because they didn't give it all. Right. In fact, and that's called shame-based thinking. When you deposit in yourself, you move past the shame-based thinking and you realize that if you don't take care of yourself first, you're no good to anyone else. So it means getting the notion out of your head and realize that you have to take care of yourself. You know, we talk about the 8 laws of health, you know, good exercise, water, fresh air, all those things are really, really important, but it means intentionally doing those things every day. Getting your nails done, getting your hair done, going shopping, all of those things, take care of yourself. Do those little accoutrements to make yourself feel good. Guys, whatever you do, exercise, do those things. And sometimes you may have more vices than virtues. As long as you balance them, you have to realize that you can't be complete unless you pour into yourself. The other part of that is we deal with emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence means that you are self-aware, you self-manage, you're socially aware, and you're social managed. Now, if a person is emotionally working with insufficient funds, some of those side effects, and I talk about in the book, you know, in terms of stress, they don't make really good decisions. They don't think clearly. They act irrationally. They tend to overeat or undereat. They tend to use vices, drinking, all those kind of things. They have poor work habits. They multitask. All those things as a result of stress. But when you focus on your emotional intelligence, and emotional intelligence is different than IQ. It means that you are able to manage your emotions, but you can't manage your emotions unless you have a healthy emotional self and you make deposits in your emotional bank. I do a whole training on just those two things, emotional literacy and emotional intelligence, and it's been received really, really well because there's a need for that right now. I talk about that really in depth in the book, and I wrote that because I was the world's worst. I was go to work early, come home late, work weekends. I had no balance at all. It took a friend of mine to literally chop me in the neck and made me come to myself and realize that I had to do better. I was so bad. I had 2 black suits. I would change the shirts out. I was wearing black suits all the time because I was going to work, but I wasn't at work. I was there, but I was dead on the inside emotionally. And
Right.
I would wear whenever my folk told me years later, but whenever I would wear a red shirt, they knew someone was getting written up that day because I was unbalanced emotionally. I didn't have balance. When I learned to balance myself, things happen. I mean, that's how I went from 60 watts to 100 watts. Finding balance. I plugged in at 40 and went to 60, ended at 100.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you guys have any questions tonight, be sure to put them in the comment box. Sam will read them later and we'll get answers for you. We've got one more thing, Dr. Burton. You talk about success without a successor, which I love that. Go ahead and tell us about it.
Hans Finkel wrote a book years ago called 15 Mistakes That Leaders Make.
Mhm.
I read the book, but the most important part, the thing that stood out to me the most in that book was great leaders, not good leaders, great leaders
Mhm.
groom their successors while they're there.
Mhm.
And if you look at the history of a great leader, and politicians do it, business folk do it, it's just in our profession, we don't do it a whole lot. But great leaders do it all the time. If you're a Christian, you look at the model that Jesus did, he took 12 guys in the training because he knew he was leaving.
Mhm.
In fact, so we're supposed to do that. And what happens sometimes, it's really important, especially in schools that had to be turned around,
Mhm.
that that you build capacity on your leadership team, such that when you leave, someone can take the mantle up and carry the torch. There's nothing wrong with that. In fact, great, if you read anything about great leading, it's done all the time.
Mhm.
We just don't do it often enough. So
Right.
there's no shame in growing people who can carry on the creed and cause once you're gone. That's why the last chapter is a call to action, because in some cases it's just not done. But we should be growing the folk around us all the time. My generation did not give back as much as the generation before me, but each generation we should give back and grow the generation back. It's called paying it forward. We should be
Right.
doing that, and that's what we should be doing, particularly in schools where students are under-resourced academically and socially.
Mhm.
But it's done at all levels.
Wow. You've just sort of hit up on that last chapter, call to action. What is the action for today?
Wow, you almost made me go to church. John Lewis said that we should be getting into good trouble.
Mhm.
The vice president said that we should be speaking truth to power.
Mhm.
She said unity is our strength and diversity is our power.
Mhm.
And when we work together for a common cause and getting a good trouble, great things can happen in education. Part of the problem in my profession is that we have become accustomed to working in a system that espouses dysfunctionality, and we are okay with working in a system that's broken. So once we acknowledge the fact that the system is broken, and we realize that the answer to fix the system is us, then we engage in getting into good trouble. That good trouble means that when you see something that may be an initiative by a district or state, but doesn't really work well for your school, then you might want to look at doing something different or change how you implement that initiative. Getting into good trouble means that you put your school, or if you're a superintendent, put your district. If you're a state superintendent, put your state first. And what's interesting about that, in Florida, it made national news. The governor there, Ron DeSantis, said that there would be no mask. And in fact, he would cut the salaries of superintendents who instituted mask mandates. There were a brave few who said that they were going to do that. That's what getting into good trouble is. Good trouble means you do what's right, rightful, and righteous for all students all the time.
Wow. There is a quote that you have at the end of chapter 7 that says that our profession is full of well-intended people doing ordinary things. Too far often we confuse movement or activity with progress. Sort of talk about that.
Well, there's a difference in activity and progress. Activity looks busy, but only progress gets results. Activity, and we're really good about doing things that make us look busy, especially some of those initiatives that we have that we carry out that make us look busy. So there was activity there. But progress means that students grow. Progress means that the school grows. Progress means that the community grows. And progress means that when all those things happen, it's good for everybody. Which means that you have to make sure that everything you do is outcome based, and you measure what you do along the way. And you don't just do things just for the sake of doing it. Those days are long past. We should be making decisions now that are right and rightful and righteous for our students in our community and our school and where we live. Not just because someone says to do it. You know, slavery was legal. Wasn't right. And there have been a lot of initiatives that have been legal but have not been right. So just because it was law didn't mean it was right. So sometimes you have to challenge those things that may be legal but may not be right. And that's what that activity and progress means. Activity means you're doing things, but progress means you're getting results. That's why I lose back into getting in good trouble. That's why I lose back into unity is our strength and diversity is our power. If we band together and do what's right for the children, we're all better for it.
Wow. This is a wonderful book, especially if you are an educator or, as a matter of fact, a lot of principals in here, pretty much goes for everybody. We understand, Dr. Burton, that your book is going to be used at LSU in their graduate level educational courses, and also it's going to be used as a source textbook at North Kentucky University in their graduate level courses. Tell our audience, well, other than Shreve Memorial Library, of course, we have this book in our library. You can check it out at Shreve Memorial Library, but I'm pretty sure there's some other places that our audience can get this book.
Yes, you can get the book on Amazon or Barnes & Noble or anywhere fine books are sold. It's doing really well on Amazon now. And I am glad you mentioned that book is resonating really well with those who are principals and or aspiring principals, and not just principals, but school leaders on every level. In fact, the Florida Association of School Administrators will be using my book as a book study for the month of September and October. And I will be the featured speaker during that month. You know, so we're talking to all administrators in that state. Dr. Darrell Gates is the director of Institute for Effective Teaching at Mississippi Valley State University. They're going to be using the book for their teachers. You know, so the book is really resonating with millennials, school leaders at every level. And I was surprised they see it as much, the millennials see it as much as a life skills book, as much as the book on education. Because right. I really tell the story about where I was strong and where I was weak. So I'm really transparent in the book. So they see someone who's being transparent and tells their life story. Right. Hence my next book.
Sounds wonderful. Sam, do we have any questions in our comment box?
No questions tonight.
No questions tonight. Also, Dr. Burton, should I mention that the National Association of African American Studies Conference, you're going to be speaking there as well? Is
Yes,
that?
I was very, very blessed and fortunate last year. That is a global conference.
Mhm,
It's really NAS and affiliates. Our affiliates are um, Latinx, Asians, Asian Americans, and Native Americans.
mhm.
But not really Americans. It really is a global conference. In fact, I moderated the conference for someone last year that was based in Japan, and
Mhm.
it is hosted by, as you mentioned, the National Association of African American Studies and affiliates. And my first book, The Reframing of American Education, I spoke from that book the first year. It did really, really well. I mean, it was received not just here, but it was when I say received, they during the whole week that the conference was going on, it was carried on their websites. It was one of the books that was carried. In fact, they had when you saw Kamala Harris, my book came right behind her book. So I felt like I was in good company. So they
You're right behind the vice president.
oh boy, I felt really good. I felt honored. It was scrolling right across the screen. You saw her book and you saw mine. I was very fortunate this year to be asked back to speak again at the global conference, and they will be featuring. I'll be featuring my new book, More Than a Notion,
Mhm,
and people literally from all over the world at that conference. It's a really good conference,
mhm,
and I've just been I've enriched. I did a lot of networking. It was very good. Also, I was able in July of this year. I spoke at the mega conference in Alabama. The mega conference in Alabama is where it's a state conference for school leaders. And I
mhm.
was very fortunate to be able to speak at that conference again about the same book. I spoke to a group of principals, and they're having me back again next year to do
Wow.
multiple sessions on
Mhm.
on their book and some more training. So, I've just been very, very, very blessed. The book has been very, very well received.
Wonderful. Now, one big question is a prophet honored in his own country. How has Caddo Parish received this work?
Well, one of the reviews in the book, and the reviews come from folk all over the place. One of the reviews is done by Dr. Goree.
Mhm,
So he wrote a review.
mhm,
Um, it's been encouraged. In terms of sales, I don't really know.
mhm.
I know my friends in Caddo have big hearts, and I'm sure will be engaging and using it as much as they can.
Okay.
I do want to jump in. We do have one question in the chat box, which kind of goes back to what you were talking about, global conference. The question is, what are your thoughts about national standards in education? Can it help or hinder closing the gap you mentioned? At some point, we have to compete in the real world.
I'm glad I hope whoever said that gets my book, because in the book I talk about how when you look at the real world in education, we are very, very competitive. I mean, when you look at the TIMSS test, the national test, the PISA test for science, and when you look at all the tests for creativity, we're at the top. We're at the very, very top. The misnomer is that we're not because of the system that we have that has grades and this national norm. When you look at America, when you compare to the G20, the G8, on an international scale, our students do well. And that's when you compare us to schools in China and all industrialized countries. Our students do really, really well. So that's a common misnomer, and I hope they get the book to see that is not the case at all. In fact, I talk about that in the section, chapter Ivy talked about the era of accountability. That's a really bad misnomer, and that is not the case at all. Now, do I believe in accountability? Yes. But I believe accountability is done best at the lowest level, local level, state level, and it shouldn't be one size fits all. It should meet the needs of the folk in that state and that district. In fact, there was a study called the 8-year study, which I talk about in the book, and they in education did the 1830s, and they did schools in the country. They had two control sets. One set was given a curriculum, and the other set they were able to teach students basic life skills, how to think, how to problem solve. And at the end of the 8 years, the students that were taught life skills, how to think, how to problem solve, did much better in college and life than the other students. Because they weren't taught how to think, and they were given just a national norm and a national test and national curriculum. It's no secret. Those of us in education, especially those who are in higher ed, know the truth. And most of us know the truth. It's just that very often we don't speak truth to power. Good question. Great question. I hope you get the book.
Thank
Well-
you. There are no more questions in the chat box.
Well, are there any parting words, Dr. Burton? We have enjoyed going through this book, and ladies and gentlemen, if you have not read it, there are good principles in there for just everyday living, even if you're not an educator. But I know it speaks directly to educators, but if you just want to try to get beyond the turning point, this is a great book to try to propel yourself a little further.
I just want to thank you all. Thank the Shreve Memorial Library family for embracing me. Which you asked about how was the school system embracing the book. The Shreveport community has been very, very kind. I've been on 2 radio stations promoting it. You guys have been very, very kind. So I really appreciate that. You've made, I see people on here that I know it's been received really, really well. And I just want to be such that I want to leave a legacy such that they realize that we can really change education for the better. If we realize that unity is our strength and diversity is our power, and we have the gumption, the gall, and the audacity to speak truth to power and get into trouble.
And on that note, ladies and gentlemen, that's it for tonight's author chat. Meet us the first Thursday of each month right here for Shreve Memorial Library Author Chat.